Before we get started, I just wanted to say a few words. First of all, on behalf of the 7th ID, G6, and G6 CMAS Major, I would like to thank everyone for attending today. This is a mentorship session that we are trying to basically promote growth and development for our leaders, our NCO leaders across the Signal Corps. And I guess it best sums it up with the quote from Warren Buffett when he says, "When people tell me they've learned from experience, I tell them the trick is to learn from other people's experience." And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring senior leaders to bring their experience and their knowledge back into the Signal Corps, within the Signal Corps NCOs, so that we can continue to grow and develop. This will be our agenda for today. We will have a brief question and answer portion after Command Sergeant Major Nichols is finished speaking. I ask that those that have questions to use the chat function in MS Teams, and the protocol will be simply put your name, your unit, and your question. And when we transition to the question portion of this event, I will be fielding these questions to Command Sergeant Major Nichols, and he will provide those answers to you. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for the day. It's Command Sergeant Major Jack Nichols. He is the R Cyber Command Sergeant Major. Wealth of knowledge and experience, and we are very excited and very grateful for him to take this time out and share with us today. So at this time, Command Sergeant Major Nichols, the comm is yours.
Hey, appreciate it. I'd like to say thanks to the team out there at 7th ID. You know, they called me about a couple of weeks ago asking if I'd be interested in supporting this venue, and I said absolutely. You know, Chief Burns, I think did it last week, maybe the week before, but you know, he also gave me kind of information and just told me, hey, you know, it's a pretty good deal. So I do appreciate it. I do see and recognize several names out there. You know, and if you got any questions, I'm going to give a little spiel about who I am, where I've come from, the operations and training that I've done over the years. I will not try not to bore you, you know, because you know, if you know me, I like to tell stories and stuff, and you know, there's always story time with Jack, you know. So again, thanks for the opportunity. But if we go to the first slide, Sergeant Major, you can drop the R slide here. You know, one of the things, you know, as I get out there and talk to soldiers and the team and just do an introduction, you know, a lot of times many people don't know where you come from. You know, with me, I was born in Panama. My biological father is Irish German, but, you know, I was naturalized in 1975, came to the United States with my mom. My dad's a retired sergeant major. He lived, you know, he was an MI sergeant major. You know, and he tried to convince me to become an MI sergeant or an NCO when I came in the Army, and you know, I didn't take heed, and I was a 31 Charlie. For most of you who probably don't know what a 31 Charlie was back in those days, we were rat rig guys, right? So got the opportunity to operate in one of those high-speed trucks. Had a great NCO teach me all about that truck. And, you know, I can sit here today and I can tell you about, and I can rattle off the nomenclature, the 122 rat rig shelter, you know, the 525 modem. I remember everything that NCO taught me. So, you know, he was a great NCO by the name of Russell Ramos, just getting me out there and, you know, doing some great things and teaching me. But, you know, as I came in the Army and I had a couple of great assignments, you know, went out there to went to Korea initially. And then I went to 470th, and then I went to the Ranger Regiment. But I'm going to get into that here a little bit after I talk a little bit more about where I am with the family. As you look up at the slide there, like I said, I came in 1989, and then I met my wife Carlene in 2000 when we were going through SOROC. She was an electronics technician in the Navy. And, you know, I tell you, if you have never worked with an electronics tech, they are pretty sharp. She was the one that actually got me through school, because there was no way I was going to make it without her. But, you know, what I'd like to highlight on that piece is that, you know, it was about teamwork, and it was the organization pushing us through. So, you know, in the next slide, you'll see we'll talk a little bit about that as well. A little bit of my hobbies, I like woodworking and being creative. I tend to make gifts and farewell gifts for persons that are leaving, you know, good friends of mine or just somebody within the organization. You know, as you look in the middle there, there's a little looks like two luchadores, right? So little wrestlers, and that was Chief Ferlagi and I when I left ForceCom. And the reason I kind of created that little thing was because, you know, him and I we would talk about things, we would argue about things in a sense, but what made sense is what we talked about quite often. And if it worked, then we were aligned and we presented that to our boss. And, you know, but again, those are the kind of things that, you know, based on our interactions and things that we did together, that was a, you know, a little farewell token that I gave him. I'm a people person, and like I said, I know most of the persons on the Teams call here. And, you know, if you know me, you know that I like to talk. I'm going to tell you stories. I'm going to give you a time. There was once this time that I did something or somebody did something. Because you can relate a lot of these things to your actions throughout the Army, and you can remember a lot of things based on a time when you did something with a friend, a teammate, you know, or just somebody that you didn't know at the time, and kind of, you know, you remember something that just kind of happened. I enjoyed the military. I've been in 31 years at this point. I did have a small break in service back in 93, 94. But that was only to kind of find out that I didn't want to be a communications person anymore. I wanted to be an infantryman. But based on the process and kind of things that everybody kept on telling me I couldn't do, I decided to get out. And I'll share kind of a little more about that, you know, as I talk about, you know, mentoring and being a leader and taking care of soldiers. But, you know, at the end there, you'll see I value my faith, my family, and my friends. And it's who I get to meet. You know, those are really important to me, because as I get the opportunity to talk up and down the hallways, you know, bumping into somebody here and there, to me, that's important. It's building those relationships. You know, yesterday I had the opportunity to sit down at went to the dining facility. I told Sergeant Kaiser, who assists me every day, that hey, I need to have that on the counter to go to the dining facility and to talk to, you know, not necessarily talk to the soldiers, but just go see what they're offering in the dining facility. Did that, had a pretty good time. I got to sit with a couple of soldiers. They were here for 1 week, you know, so it was pretty impressive. But you know, they'd only been in the Army from basic training to Fort Gordon for 1 week. I do see a hand up. Let's check out what the hand is. Make sure we're still communicating. So, Colonel Geronimo, do you have something, sir?
No, CSM, please continue. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. No, but again, you know, it's kind of those things, you know, sitting there with that soldier yesterday, and, you know, me and one of the first sergeants were sitting there talking to them. And, you know, I kind of put myself back 30 plus years ago when I was that young soldier sitting in a chow hall dining facility, and some staff sergeant was there with a round brown. You know, and I was like, man, you know, I can't wait to be a drill sergeant or a sergeant just in general. And you know, it was funny talking to the soldiers, because they were sitting there and talking about, you know, where they came from, you know, that they're here to, the 25 Bravos is what they were, and I'm probably hearing some hulas out there. But you know, what they were kind of working toward, and you know, being that they were here only 1 week. You know, that all their interest in the things that they're finding. They were telling me they were going to go to airborne school, that it was only 2 weeks long, you know, so I was like, all right, I don't know if it's 2 weeks long. It might have changed. I went a long time ago, but pretty sure it's 3 weeks. But, you know, had the opportunity to, you know, sit down and, you know, have that conversation with them. But as I highlighted earlier, you know, I came in the Army, did my first 4 years with 2 MI brigades. You see down there in the bottom left, the 501st and the 470th MI brigade. And then I got out for about a year. And then I came back in, and I went to 2nd Ranger Battalion. I did the RIP contract back then and had the opportunity to go to airborne school, RIP, and then to 2nd Ranger Battalion. And then I stayed there till about 98, 99, and then shifted over to Special Operations Command. And there I stayed a long time. And you know, I'll field questions about that too, because, you know, we talk about diversity in assignments and kind of locations that soldiers have been. And, you know, sometimes kind of the things that we look at, you know, because, you know, we often say career killers. I don't necessarily think it was ever a career killer for me. I got a lot of opportunities to do some great things. And then in 2013, 2014, as the cyber missions units were being established, I was asked if I could come. You know, I was selected to be on the primary principal for one of the battalions at the time, but I wasn't slated for a particular battalion. And the cyber missions unit provisional was being established about that time. So I had the opportunity to come down to Fort Gordon and put together what became the Cyber Protection Brigade. as well as the Cyber Mission Force, the 25 or the 17 series soldiers. So left there in 2018-19 to go to ForceCom, did the G6 position at ForceCom. I had never been in ForceCom. I had never been in a ForceCom unit. So, that was one of the things during the interview that I presented to the leadership that, my assignments is what you see on the left. I haven't transitioned very much in my 30 plus years in the Army. And then ForceCom off to the headquarters of the G6 Sergeant Major for General Crawford at the time. And then recently I just assumed this position on 2 April of this month. So, still pretty new to me, but, a great opportunity. Go on to the next slide, please. As the next slide uploads, I kind of know what's on there. The thing I would tell you, looking up at the upper left side of the slide, is, everything you hear about all the time. Take care of people, take care of, the civilians, take care of the soldiers, and take care of your team. That's quite important. I mean, obviously, it is one of the primary things we talk about all the time. And I expect as leaders that we're doing that. The assumption is happening, but the truth of the matter is it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes we miss things, and we just don't know what we don't know. But I'd ask everybody, I just throw it out there because it's something that everyone is tracking. I just wanted to make sure that, they're tracking that, as we go around the little chart here of kind of what I mean by taking care of people. And going into the know your battle drills is very similar to taking care of your people. Know what you got to do, know your job, know your role, know what's coming about, know what systems are out there, know your equipment. As we used to always have execution checklists, and you kind of go line by line, kind of, hey, communications are going to be up by these particular times. Those are the kind of things that your people, your team, your soldiers want to know as well. Because if you don't give them a left and right limit, a lot of times we're just kind of doing things. I do remember we always had that high-speed specialist that was really good at what they did, and we always called upon that person. What I'd ask is, if you know the battle drills, and you can call upon just about anybody on that team to kind of do things. And that goes into growing leaders. In my career, I didn't want to do a lot of things, to be perfectly honest. I share that with you because, I'm going to be open with you about this. Because if it wasn't for my leader knowing me and telling me the things that I needed to do, I didn't want to do them. I wasn't going to airborne school on my own because I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to go to Ranger school. But my leaders kind of told me what was going to make me better to go do certain things. It's getting the education, it's getting out there doing the training, it's competing for certain things. They were challenging me all the time. And what I was getting challenged was, they were telling me to go do these things. But my challenges were, I didn't necessarily want to do them. So it took a little bit of convincing. And sometimes what happened was that they actually just put me into something, right? So then, next thing you know, I had a 4187 for looking for a signature to go do something, because my NCO was like, no, you need to go do this. And then, it was, calling my bluff at that point, signing off on it and, making me go to do a particular course. And again, I don't like jumping out of airplanes, but I've jumped out of a lot of airplanes at this point, and I still don't like jumping out of airplanes. So I do appreciate Sergeant Russell Ramos for getting me to airborne school and convincing me that I needed to do that. But the thing that he did with me is he communicated with me. He spoke to me about the challenges. He spoke to me about what's going on in the Army. He spoke to me about all the things that were out there that I just didn't know about. I wasn't, I wasn't familiar with them. And an example was, when I was down at PLDC a long time ago at Fort Sherman, Panama, there was a whole bunch of soldiers that came there. They had these black Jeeps, and they had these black motorcycles, and they had these black PT uniforms, and I had no idea who they were. And, when I got the opportunity to talk to one of those soldiers, they told me they were with the Ranger Regiment. And I was like, man, how do I get a motorcycle? That's what I really wanted. I didn't really necessarily want to be in the Ranger Regiment. I just wanted to have an issued black motorcycle. I thought that was pretty cool. But they told me how to do these things. And, as my sergeant tried to square me away, he's like, well, you're going to have to do this. It's got to be an 11 Bravo. It's got to be this. But, what I found was we really didn't know how to do certain things. And it goes back to communicating. What we didn't communicate was that the Army was much larger. I just didn't know those assignments were out there. I was very comfortable in my organization and, bitter at some things about my organization that, I just didn't know what was out there. What was out there that was going to afford me some opportunities. Because each assignment is not the same. You guys, the team out there well knows this, and everything kind of changes throughout time. You can go to an assignment and it was the best a couple of years ago, but it isn't anymore, and I recognize that. And as we talk about those kind of things in communications and training and maintenance and readiness, that's all given. You have to do those kind of things. And that kind of goes back to everything that I'm kind of putting together here is that it all ties together. It's the retention ties together with communications. Because one of the things that I always found with soldiers was that, they've already they've got an idea of what they're going to do long before their retention cycle comes up. They want to know certain things and they want to go do certain things. But sometimes we just don't know how to support them. I do see there's a question from Sergeant Major Timms. You got something, Sergeant Major?
Yes, sir. I like the idea that you brought up communications. With this current COVID situation, we find it difficult to pass messages and communicate with our soldiers and our peers. What is a good method that you could advise on helping us maintain that communications between each other?
Okay, that's a great question because, as I saw what you guys were doing out there at Fort Lewis, CVR became a good means of communication. CVR became a great means of communication during COVID when all this kind of stood up. It was as we have a whole bunch of instances of CVR. There's not a lot of soldiers on CVR, to be perfectly honest. There's the ones that we forced to kind of do it. That was one answer. The other answer is kind of, my wife, she laughs at me because on the weekends I'll send a text to somebody and say, hey, how are you doing? A lot of times I see, somebody inviting somebody to do the 22 for 22. I tend to just call somebody and ask them how they're doing. And with the sergeants major, many of them recognize that I try to keep them informed by sending emails out to them and kind of saying, hey, this is what's going on. These are the kind of things that are coming about. So you see fragos coming out, you see op orders coming out, and what I was trying to do from my standpoint was pushing it out to the team so that they could share it with their teammates. Because dissemination of information is critical. I found that early on in my career is that, we used to sit around all day and waiting for the skinny at the end of the day, we're done doing our training. Somebody came back and took some notes somewhere and came back and told us about it. What I kind of identify quite often these days is that we don't do that very often. We go and take notes and we don't bring our notes back and share them with the team kind of, hey, this is what was going on. Some do, some don't, because I know I have a notebook full of information and sometimes I share it, sometimes I didn't. Like for instance, in the Army staff, when we were getting information, I would come back to the teammates and kind of say, hey, here's what was going on. This is what's going on with COVID. This is kind of where the timeline for the shots, so you got to be open and kind of reaching out to people sometimes, because many times they're not going to reach out to you, especially as a sergeant major. Sometimes they're not going to call you just to ask a simple question, but sometimes you need to call them to see if they understood the messaging. Does that answer your question, Sergeant Major?
Yes, Sergeant Major, it does, and thank you for that. I guess I have a kind of a follow-on question. It's just, do you see it being more challenging to lead soldiers in this virtual environment?
I would tell you I actually found it's probably easier because there's more connectivity. In my mind is that I get the opportunity to talk. Your span of control is 3 to 5 on average, right? So that's kind of what they teach you in doctrine, And when I was in a Ranger regiment, I got my 2 team leaders, my squad leader, my platoon sergeant, it was us. But the dissemination of information was expected to kind of be pushed down to those junior soldiers, right? To our junior leaders. It doesn't always happen. With this, in this time, I think that I had the opportunity because more of us are connected. If you look at what we're doing right now, today, at this moment, is something we couldn't have done in the past. Because I see Luke Bloom on there, and there's no way Luke Bloom would have been connected to this unless we had him VTC, which would have been a little bit more difficult than kind of what we got going on with a team session. And it's just the expanse of where people are at. It doesn't necessarily work very well prior to. But the other piece is the specialists and the sergeants that are also able to have the opportunities to dial in. Because I think when you sent this out, there was a whole bunch of people that, had the opportunity to get onto the call. So again, I think that to me, it's probably we've been able to reach more soldiers and to have better dialogue and presenting them, coming in, hearing it from me straightforward. Hey, this is what I see. And I think that's what a lot of the first sergeants have been kind of telling me as well. It's, there've been virtual PT sessions, and there've been all kinds of things we've done with technology. But I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Sergeant Major.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, as I keep going on, ask someone. And Sergeant Major, I appreciate those questions, because it's something that I found in my career is just, sometimes I just don't know what I don't know. And I think with CVR was one of those things is, we just don't know what we don't know. Sometimes there's when it started coming about, creating accounts for everybody, who were they getting the information from? Each post-camp station was kind of getting it from someone. As we start seeing the sunset of CVR, there's a lot of uncertainties in that as well. I think this past week I did see that it said, hey, it's going to sunset in June, July. I can't remember which particular month, but there was information that's being shared about that. There's also information being shared about a lot of the things that are coming about in the change. The Office 365, and kind of the direction we're going with that. Still manipulating it, but a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know. And with the sergeants major, I'd ask them to constantly maintain that line of communication, because as a sergeant major, I don't have all the answers. I really don't. I don't know what's going on sometimes. Things will change. There's a message that came out, a frago that came about. We've changed uniforms several times over. I recently got asked, was an umbrella authorized in OCPs? And I'd ask you guys if that's true or not. Sometimes you see it was like the watch caps, right? Can I wear the tan one, or do I have to wear the black one? If it's cold outside, which one can I wear? There's those kind of things. But if you ask someone, and I think what I did is I asked Sergeant Major Salters not too long ago, say, hey, do you have the most current ACFT, what the uniform's supposed to look like, or not the ACFT, but the uniform. It's like, so you have the most current diagram with pictures for it? And he's like, absolutely. So I sent that out to the organizations and kind of said, hey guys, this is what it is. Because again, the questions are going to be asked, especially from the junior soldiers as they go out and purchase these things. A lot of times, if you don't know, you just don't know. But if you got the pictures, you can share that with the team. And that was kind of what I was doing during the COVID environment, Sergeant Major. It was sending the information out so that the G6s, the CSMs could have the information to share with their war fighters that, whatever organization they might be in. I did get a couple questions on that at one point, because when I was sending the information out, sometimes you were beating your G3s and your S3s. And sometimes they were getting this push of information from the G6 sergeant majors. And I said, you can't complain about the information being disseminated. I do recognize there's got to be some answers here and there, but again, sharing the information is critical, and it goes back to that dissemination of information. Sergeant Major Timms, I see another hand up.
Yes, it looks like we have Sergeant Major Allen. Go ahead, Sergeant Major Allen.
Not hearing anything.
Sergeant Major Allen, check your audio, please.
My bad, can you hear me?
We got you.
Yeah, forgot to get on mic, my bad. That's fine. Well, in the hall broadcast and stuff, Sergeant Major, my question is, how can a senior enlisted within the Signal Corps better support the Signal soldier down at the tactical level from their seats? I mean, from your level, from our level, we're doing the greatest thing as people doing the gunneries and stuff like that. The SIGOs are pushing, like, hey, we gotta do the gunnery tables and stuff. But from our seats, how can we better support them and better make them authorized?
No, that's a good question, because when I sat in the Force Com seat, I recognize that too, because I could talk to the G6s, I could talk to the certain organizations within the unit, and there was the immediate discussion, right? But what I found was the down traces weren't ever getting that information. It kind of goes back to what you're asking and what I mentioned about the dissemination of information. That information flow stops at a certain level. And a lot of times the soldiers that are kind of, in those other formations that don't get a lot of, from the signal side, they don't get the signal information, the communications of what we're doing. Because as I saw it, I'd asked the question to you, are you tracking ESP-like equipment? Are you tracking that, we're coming up to smaller form factors? Are you tracking that we're working these new communications systems, radios, that the ITN was out there, like the ESPE, with the 50th and, out there in Fort Hood. A lot of times they just didn't know these things were kind of happening. So I think that the answer to your question would be kind of, it has to happen at those divisions and corps in my mind, right? Because as Fort Hood has their persons, in those other formations, it helps to kind of reach down to them. When we were at Fort Bragg, they had put together the Orange Call. And it gave us the opportunity to kind of just meet people that you'd never met before. And then, the next thing somebody's asking, hey, can I be put on that distro? And that helped out quite a bit because I didn't know that company commander was all the way over here doing this. And then that company commander wasn't tracking we were doing these kind of things. And as I pulled my bosses out of the seat and kind of coming down to go to Orange Call as well, it was that they had the opportunity to talk to the team and kind of give them a little of a presentation. The other piece is kind of what you guys are doing right now. I've recognized that you've done this with the warrant officers. I saw that I had the 7th SIG on here a couple weeks ago. So this is a great opportunity. And what's happening right now is, and what I've seen is that there's others asking for the same venue. I got hit up by a couple others because Cammie Rogers sent it out to all the signal sergeants major that said, hey, this is going on. So, you guys what you've started has kind of become kind of a trend throughout the signal corps. So I think that helps out in, disseminating the information, but communicating with the team. And hopefully that answers your question, Sergeant Major.
Yes, it does, Sergeant Major. It was great. And another question, Sergeant Major, and it's kind of moving on to another topic of the things that go on. So we're talking about training, signal flow and stuff like that. So right now, where do you see phase 2 coming along? And with cyber and signal, what kind of training do you think it would be processed? And will this MOS conversion make the signal corps even better, do you think?
Well, I think the signal corps is awesome, to be perfectly honest, and getting the opportunity to sit in the cyber side of the house, I see the benefits of both. And, I think General Eubank highlighted it the other day regarding, in his conversation with the team, as he highlighted regarding kind of, you need the operate piece of it, which is what the signal corps provides, right? We operate the DODN, we build that, we support that. To your question regarding the training and support of that, is that we've got to do it really well, right? So it becomes, we have to understand what the troubleshooting procedures are. We have to recognize when we're having problems on the network. We have to recognize that, we've got warrant officers and everything else out there that we need to talk to from the enlisted perspective. I can't see who's all on here, but, as I looked at it, that's where I've had the conversations with, the Chief Verlaghi, the Chief Robinsons, Chief Wells, Chief Bruns, and asking them the questions, hey, what are we doing, But what I think what needs to happen with many of us is that we've got to understand the equipment that's coming to us. All right, so you start looking at those smaller dishes. I'm a Charlie by trade. I don't know SHF as well as I should have known SHF, but I had the opportunity to learn SHF with some great instruction at other organizations. They taught me what noise floor, what power was. They taught me what EBNO was. What polarization meant. Those are the kind of things that I can't be kind of stuck in my own MOS at a certain point, because everything's tied, ones and zeros, or if it has batteries or some kind of electrons flows through it, it becomes a signal issue, correct? And if I can see some head nods out there, I tell you what, I was asked about JVCP systems in the past, and not necessarily something that I was taught, but something that I understood because I understood the signal flow and kind of how everything tied into it. As you look at transceivers and everything else that kind of happen, you got to have those things up on the networks. But those networks have to be for updates. It has to be for service and life cycle. It has to be kind of things that we can identify so we can push patches and everything else. That's what I think that the signal corps needs to focus on, just to ensure that our mission command platforms are ready to execute when it's time to do something. And I think that that's kind of what many of you are getting at, but it's also articulating that to all of our teammates out there, because sometimes we have those JVCP systems sit inside of connexes but they need to get an update. So, motor stables are important. But, to tie into that is that from the signal perspective is that, I did recognize from the ForceCom seat once again, was that it was very hard to get leaders to kind of put the signal training on the calendar for me or for them. But it had to be important because you had to articulate why was it important. Sir, it's this. It's because these systems need to be patched. They need to be updated. They need, some of them need to be identified for life cycle. But those are the kind of things. But with convergence, I think a lot of that's going to kind of come to help out, because right now, everybody's tracking. There's a lot of MOSs in the Signal Corps. We've moved some of the audio visual to the PAO side, but we also have some of the MOSs that are kind of just combining and consolidating. Very similar in some work roles. Like I mentioned before to other soldiers, the 25 Deltas and the 17 Charlies. There's similarities, but it's all not the same. One's doing the establishing and putting those securities and measures onto the DODN, and the other one's defending it from one of the CPTs or doing the OCO side of the house. But like I said, I could get into more, but hopefully that answers the majority of your question. Over.
Oh, yes, it did, Sergeant Major. Thank you.
Okay. We have another question, Sergeant Major.
Yes, we've got Master Sergeant Starr with the question. Go ahead, Master Sergeant.
Sergeant Major. What are your recommendations on how we can keep proficient in the skills with the Army continuing to get commercial off-the-shelf COT equipment, and how to get them trained and, get them to the schoolhouse? And, there's so many pieces of equipment. I'll use an example as the ECK comes off the shelf straight from CLOS. A lot of soldiers don't know how to use that equipment. So how are we going to incorporate using COT equipment into units?
Once again, as I saw this when I sat at the department, it was kind of all this great equipment, and the conversation was like, we get all this high-speed equipment, where's the training that comes with the equipment? Because so it's complex. There's a lot of great systems that are coming about. A lot of that information I follow, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I followed it on social media. I see we're coming up with the CFT and what they're doing out there, with the communications platforms that they're running. General Gallagher posts a lot of posts regarding kind of things that are coming about. When I sat at the Pentagon, I had the opportunity to see what ASAP was doing and the PEOs and all the great information and the technologies that were coming about. Because as you see IVAS and all these other things, I was like, wow, that's pretty significant. That's pretty neat. But as I mentioned a little while ago, if it has batteries or ones and zeros that flow through it, it kind of becomes a signal problem. I just remember when night vision goggles were kind of being phased in, and I go back, I've been in a long time. There were night vision goggles before I came in the Army, trust me. But as they came about when I was in the 2nd Ranger Battalion, I was the guy responsible for night vision goggles because they had batteries, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just checking them and making sure. They were telling me that, it's got a pixelation in it, and I look at it, and, I didn't understand it, but I had to pull out the TM. I had to call somebody, and I just remember a guy named Tim Tapio at that time, kind of squared me away with, hey, this is what it does, and this is how you can, fix them. And then, understanding the gas and everything else that was in there. But, to that, as we go fast forward into kind of where we're at now, is with NEF, a lot of the soldiers that are getting the equipment fielded to them will get the training as the fielding comes about. Now, the con to that is that NEF supports a lot of the soldiers that are currently in the organization. And you're probably seeing this in many of your formations. As Nichols transitions out, Timms comes on board. And, Nichols is going to give him about, if I'm on a good day, I'll give him about 20% of what I know about the system. And then, Timms is kind of expected to operate the system. But without that, you struggle, because then now you're not having a lot of the education and keeping up with the technology, because I only know a little small portion of it, but I don't necessarily know everything about it. As the installations have what used to be called the signal universities, I think that's kind of where you can tie some of that in. There's funding associated with that to kind of get those types of different technologies in. But the con to that is a lot of times you have to borrow it from the organization that currently has the technology. And then, and ensuring that the instructors have a little bit of training on it. So I did see a little bit of that happening. But to stay abreast of the technology, I think that one of the things you're going to have to look at is kind of what is it, understanding theory. And, here's an example. Right now, I couldn't say that I understand all the radios that are out there, but I do understand radio theory. I understand frequency ranges, UHF, VHF, FM, AM, and what they kind of do, what the modulations mean. I do understand kind of cutting halfway frequencies and, antennas to support communications. I do understand where the satellites are in the process of trying to establish comms. And I do recognize that sometimes the options files aren't going to always be right, but what is wrong with the options file? What is wrong with my encryption? And it goes into that troubleshooting. What somebody taught me a long time ago was the schematics and the diagrams. And understanding that kind of helped me out quite a bit, because if I understood what the signal flow was from end to end, it supported everything. Because if I could turn something off over here, I recognized over here is where it was where we were having the issues. Satellite systems, that was quite apparent. It was often that way. With the ECK kits, I was highlighting this to a teammate one time. I was saying, we should have because my daughter watches YouTube, and she has all these people she follows, and they teach her how to do something. My wife and I obviously get on there and I say, I don't know how to do that. I've got an RV right now, and I don't know if something's wrong with it, and I go on YouTube, or I put it on Facebook or something, and somebody right away has an answer for me. And it tells me, hey, check this out. It might be this. And I find that, sometimes maybe, I look at it as we should have a couple soldiers kind of put together a dish and kind of say, hey, this is what happens when you do it this way. And this is what happens when it's wrong. Because as I was thinking about talking about these kind of things, one of the things I saw was what I remember in ops checks and troubleshooting was I had one NCO that would tell me when it wasn't working that it's gremlins, right? And it's 1700, it's time to go home. And we aren't even troubleshooting anymore. We're done for the day. And, and the system never came up. We didn't operate it. To have another NCO that would be there with me, and he says, all right, hey, you guys need to figure out a sleep plan at this point, because we're going to stay here tonight until this thing comes up. We're going to keep ops checking it. The guys on the distant end are going to stay up, and we're going to have it working by tomorrow. So again, it was troubleshooting and doing that maintenance. To expand upon that is for your question regarding the your new kit and training. I will tell you to put it through its paces. Bring that thing up, bring it down, bring that thing up, bring it down. And, when you got that mastered, you put a fault into it. You remove a cable and ask somebody else to put it on, and that way the troubleshooting starts happening, because you don't want the troubleshooting to be happening when you're actually trying to perform a mission. The troubleshooting should all be done, and all the training should be done before you actually operate the system. And that's what I would tell you, that to help prepare soldiers to be better at what they do is that, you got to put them through the paces on the systems, but you also got to inject the faults into the system, because it can't always be right. And, to that soldier that told me, hey, we'll check it tomorrow because it's gremlins. The way we were testing that system was, there was a line in the ground, and we pointed it in the same direction every time we ops checked it. And then when it was time to fly somewhere, I didn't have that line in the ground to say that's where I needed to point it. So I needed to know where the 105 bird was, the 23 bird was, or wherever for the satellite comms. But I hope that answered your question.
Hey, yeah, I bet it did, Sergeant Major. That was great information. Hey, while you were going on, Sergeant Major, you mentioned something about the universities across all over installations. So, and you mentioned the cost and budget to it. Now, with the cost and budget, where do you see it going now, and how can we pick up on that if we don't have like the Courage universities or the signal universities across the Signal Corps?
Yeah, that's a hard fix. It really is, I just remember having MTTs. We were fortunate to, be able to get persons to come in and kind of teach us a system as we had that. I don't know where you guys are at in that, but we were able to get that mobile team to come out and kind of teach us a particular device, or kind of showing us, the thing. I'd encourage you to kind of reach out and the kind of what you got going on right now, because this is a great example of how it works, right? Because when I talked about the YouTube thing, is that I don't know who I'm talking to on the distant end. They're not talking to me. I'm just watching what they're doing. And we were able to do that. We were able to solve a lot of problems with my things at the house. But with communications, the same thing applies here. Is that talking to somebody, and maybe it's reaching out to one of those posts and camps and stations that do have the resources to provide some of that training. I will certainly guarantee you that they will be happy to assist, especially if you fall within one of the corps or divisions that you're in the footprint. Because cost of sending a soldier to go to these courses is pretty significant. With COVID, it wasn't happening, and it's probably very difficult to get somebody out the door right now. But I think that, if you reach out to them, a lot of times if you have the equipment on the distant end, they'll walk you through the paces and kind of teach you hey, this is step one. And, you're going to find these faults and flaws and these things that you may want to request. Because they'll also give you information about some of the maintenance issues too. Because as we were getting some of the dishes early on, we needed a repair kit, we needed a service kit, we needed some extra dishes. We needed some some of the things that we knew that were going to break. Cables were going to break. So then there's a maintenance kit that needed to be added to it. The crimpers for Cat 5. How do you terminate a fiber? So you had to have those kind of things. The Fluke multimeter. Got to go out there and checking your cables and everything else. But it's a lot of those things were kind of added to kits. And a lot of times you learn that from somebody else that's kind of doing it, and they'll give you some information to support. But I think that if you reach out to those locations, or even sometimes some of the persons that are actually providing some of the training for net and F, reaching out to like Sergeant Major Guerra out there at Fort Hood, or Sergeant Major Castillo out there at the 50th, I think they might be able to help you out with some of that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I did, Sergeant Major.
Awesome. Sergeant Major James, you got something else?
Well, actually, Sergeant Major, I have a question from one of our audience. Sergeant First Class Carlson, since we're talking about equipment, he wants to know, he read a few years ago that the Army was ending the contract with WinT, and if you knew anything about that. And if it is true, what are we supposed to be transitioning? Is there anything identified that we're transitioning to that we're going to be training on?
Well, that's a hard question with a really long answer. The answer is it is changing. The communications platforms are changing. You'll find there's ESBE formations. Those are the kind of things that are coming about. We still need those systems, because that's what we're operating on. I do recognize they're complex. They're difficult to operate. Some of them are in the need of some maintenance, and we've, I know when I was at ForceCom, they shifted some of the systems to support the maintenance of those communications platforms. But we're still teaching it to many aspects, because many organizations have it. So as the Army transitions, one of the things I kind of just to highlight to you there, Sergeant First Class, is that you can't make things happen overnight. It is a huge Army, and cost and budgets. It takes time to get from point A to point B. As we were talking about, some of these increments that are coming about, you look at the fielding of certain systems. They're not all going to be the same by the time they get fielded to the next organization, because something likely will change. And it kind of goes back to that other question: how do you continue to sustain the momentum? The technology shifts often enough that we have to kind of change out kind of what we're purchasing at a particular time. And in some instances, what you get today may not be exactly the same than what they're going to get at Fort Hood, what they're going to get at Fort Carson, what they're going to get at Fort Lewis. And there's reasons for that. Is because if we were purchasing it the way we kind of used to purchase it, we would all still have Blackberries, right? And because we couldn't field them fast enough. There's not enough of them to get out there fast enough. But as we looked at it and allowed the organizations to kind of look at hey, when we need some new phones, and you purchase those new phones, we're not kind of giving them from the Army. We said, hey, this is kind of the general area you kind of need to be in, left-right limits that is provided by the G6 of the Army, right? And kind of saying this is what you can purchase. The purchased, request type things that they're put out there, kind of these are the types of items that you can purchase off the shelf, with that off the shelf question that came about, because there are certain things that you can and you can't not buy. But with that there, Sergeant, I think that the answer is that, it will constantly shift. It will, each organization is going to get some of the newer things, but it will certainly take some time to get there. And as we look at the Cape sets and everything else, as they're working ITN as well, is that, we're still fielding some of the glitches in some of the systems. How do they work? How do they tie into other networks? And what makes them better? One of the things I got to see not too long ago was, I don't know if you guys saw the vertical lift antenna, which is pretty much a drone, that kind of flies up and extends the frequency range. But pretty neat, but again, those are the things that are coming about. And it will transition. I know that doesn't necessarily answer your question, is it all being phased out? And the answer is that it will be, but it's going to take time to get the new equipment on board to kind of push out the other systems. And like, for instance, as I mentioned earlier, I had a rat rig a long time ago. I saw rat rigs in the Army until about 2000. So, it took a long time to get them out, even though I wasn't even operating them in 1992. Over. Next question.
Sergeant Major. Okay, this one's not an easy one to ask, but coming from the group, what are your thoughts on the current environment and Army's initiative for diversity and inclusion across the Army ranks?
Hey, coming from Panama, I totally understand. With diversity and inclusion, I think that it's something that we need to work towards. That we've identified some gaps. We've started trying. We started to do the training. There's looking at the opportunities for soldiers. Prior to a lot of this, one of the questions I had is like, why couldn't a signal sergeant major be a division sergeant major? There's a 230 plus signal sergeants majors, and you kind of ask those kind of questions. Why not? Because I wasn't combat arms. And like I said, this is all prior to a lot of the discussions that were happening right now. But with the opportunities, I think that we should afford those opportunities to everybody, because as a signal sergeant major, I think that we've got some great sergeant majors that can go do those kind of things. It's the assignments. I think what you kind of identified recently is that we've got an MP female sergeant major going to take the 101st. And that's pretty significant, as you're looking at a lot of the positions and kind of identifying the talents, and you're looking at across the board. I think that it's kind of happening quite a bit, so I fully support it. I think that there's a lot of discussions that are being had and that need to be had. When I said in the department, we were having the discussions kind of looking at kind of how do you bring more persons in. What I'd encourage all of you to do is go out there and kind of bring your teammates in, because when you look at different states and the different populations of persons that are in the Army, coming from Panama, I could recognize there's another Panamanian sergeant major even on Fort Gordon. That's just as an example. But going around, it's like I go to the communities and I tell soldiers about kind of the opportunities within the military, and I think that that's kind of what everybody should be out there kind of highlighting that it is diverse. I've had a great opportunity to serve with some great persons in my career, and I'll continue to push the discussions that are happening. So again, I fully support. I think that it's been recognized that for certain organizations that as we start having the discussions. When I was in the Ranger Regiment, I enjoyed my time there. I had a great time in the Ranger Regiment, but it was like, guys, I looked around at the time, there wasn't many Hispanics in the Ranger Regiment. In my battalion. And then, but as I started looking around, through the course, there was more people. And again, sometimes it's just don't know what you don't know. We just don't know what opportunities are out there. And had it not been for Sergeant Ramos, who told me I need to go to Ranger Regiment, I would have had no opportunity. I didn't know that it existed. And, thanks to him, got me over there and it got me into the special operations side. So, that's speaking of me a little bit and kind of what I saw, but I do strongly support the whole initiative of taking a look at the entire formation. Hopefully that answers your question. Over.
Roger, Sergeant Major. That put it in a good perspective, because a couple things you said kind of falls into things where, like, I was looked at for a first sergeant position, but because, like you said before, the MOS thing.
Right.
I'm a signal MOS. This was an HR MOS. You can't fall into that position because of that. So when you said that, that really hit home.
No, absolutely, and I've identified that with several. I mean, so if I look around, I smile now because of I get a congratulations to First Sergeant so and so who's down at JRTC assumed this position, and sometimes you're like, wow, that's an infantry position, and he's in there and he's doing it. But again, it goes back to the credibility. What I got up there on the left of my slide, and just kind of really, I want to hit this real quick before we move on, is the timing and opportunities. I mean, that's a huge thing, especially for sergeants major. Timing and opportunities are kind of things that we talk about often. Especially as I sit in the nominative side of the house, is that I wanted the signal regiment, I wanted the netcom. But I didn't get netcom, and I didn't pop up on an interview for either one of those two because my timing was off a little bit. And what I got, and this kind of goes back to not all assignments are what you necessarily want. And it kind of ties into your question there, Master Star, was that as I looked at it, not all assignments was what I want. The pros was that I got to go into an assignment, and I used the example of selection and training. They put me in selection and training, and I saw that as the boneyard for myself. I was like, man, everybody that goes in there retires. That's what everybody does. Everybody who's ever been there, and I looked at the wall, whatever picture they may have had, everybody retired before me on that. So I wasn't really ready to retire. I don't want to retire. I was at the 18-year mark, and I wasn't ready to do this, But what I was able to accomplish was changing the mindset of the position by doing some things that I thought were innovative. The selection and training managed SOROC, Special Operations Radio Operator, of course, at the time. And what I saw was, if I can get the equipment for the formation rather than borrowing from our teams, is that we can palm it, get it into the training cycle so that the soldiers are operating their own equipment, which answered your question earlier, is that we had the equipment to train on, but we also had the equipment to operate on. So we were able to fund that. Now, granted, that's a special operations side, a different world of kind of funding and everything else, but that was part of our training solutions. But then, as I moved forward, then I wanted to be the battalion CSM, and I didn't get the battalion that I wanted, and then I was kind of like, a bit bitter about that, oh man, I didn't get it, woe's me. But what I got was actually the cyber protection, the cyber missions unit, which ended up being a little bit better in my mind because I was given something that was brand new. It was unique. It was a change, and I had the opportunity to, establish the culture and build upon kind of what it didn't have, identify the TTPs, the SOPs, and make this organization kind of what it was, right? But it's also looking into kind of building the formation that we recognize that, hey, it probably needed to go into the 17 world by building a maneuver, falling under the 20s and under a lot of the maneuver. And it's a new space, a new domain, and I was like, wow, I got the opportunity to do that. And then, like I said, I wanted NetCom and I wanted the regiment. I got ForceCom. And like, holy smokes, man, had I not got ForceCom, which kind of gave me the opportunity to see the Army in its entirety, like, man, that was one of the best assignments I've ever had. And I tell you what, I really appreciate the opportunity that General Isaacson had given me to come there, knowing that I didn't have any ForceCom background prior to that. Because as we looked at it, and understanding what General Gallagher was doing up at the cross-functional team and building all these things, it was pretty significant. But, just to highlight a little bit of that. But Sergeant Major, I see there's another hand up.
Yes, we've got Sergeant Major Blum. Go ahead, Sergeant Major Blum.
Hey, good afternoon, Sergeant Major Nichols. Sergeant Major Luke Bloom. I'm the Senior Enlisted Leader for the Army Research Lab. Can you describe, either during your time with the CIOG6, ForceCom, or Cyber, how you guys interfaced with Army Futures Command and where you see Signal or Cyber going in the future? Over.
Yeah, so the answer to the first question is that my boss constantly talks to those leaders. My current one and my previous one, there was a lot of dialogue that goes on at those levels. And to add to that, Sergeant Major, here's what I would kind of from every level, is that as a platoon sergeant, you got to be involved with the discussions with your PL. As a first sergeant, you got to be involved with the discussions with your company commander. And I had the opportunity to watch General Crawford, General Fogarty, as well as General Morrison, as they're having the conversations with these leaders and talking about kind of what they're doing. Because as I said at the Pentagon, I was out in the conversations, as I mentioned earlier, with the PEOs and kind of talking to the ASALT Sergeant Major, the G4 Sergeant Major. So it's those relationships that you got to have. And I think that kind of goes into answering your questions. As you're sitting in your position, your predecessor and I used to talk often. But COVID kicked about, and I was supposed to go and visit you before I left the Pentagon, because I'm pretty sure there was a couple venues that you wanted to kind of show me, kind of, hey, this is the direction of things. But what I would encourage you to do is on these kind of forums, and within the sergeants major population, is send some of that information to all of us, kind of what you're doing. Because I see it, like as I mentioned with General, as they're going on and doing all these discussions, is that they have the information, the slides, and trying to share those. The thing that I will share with you was when I was sitting at the CIO G6 side of the house, is that a lot of it was pre-decisional. So that's why it wasn't necessarily shared a lot of times. It wasn't until it came to be that we shared the information as this is direction. But by that point, the unit had already been established. This is already going on over here, and it's fielding that equipment to a particular unit. With that, I think that's kind of the discussions that need to be had. They are doing it. I do see them do it quite often. Sergeant Major Crosby and I have had conversations in the past, and kind of what they're doing with their new labs that they're creating down there, and because that required signal talent with the 25 deltas that were going to futures. But for information dominance is kind of the direction that our cyber is kind of going, building towards, that platform. Cyber is kind of a general area, but as we got EW, as we got cyber, we got signal, and, we've got a lot of other things that are coming about with, developers and, the warrant officers and, what we're doing with the teams. I think a lot of that's kind of the change that you'll kind of see throughout the time. But as I mentioned, for the signal community, operate is what you guys do. And you're going to support those networks, and that's a huge part of everything. So I do get often asked this question a lot, Sergeant Major Bloom, is the signal corps going away? And I would tell you, no, it is not. There is no way it can go away. Because all the things and platforms that we provide the warfighters, all those things are available based on kind of what you guys are getting out there and doing. So I do appreciate that. It's the S6s, the G6s, it's the sergeants major, it's the first sergeants, it's the company commanders, all having that dialogue with one another, but sharing kind of a, hey, here's the technology, hey, here's how this works. And like you said, Sergeant Major, is that, kind of sharing. After this, I'll send it out to Sergeant Major Timms, but I've got this list of locations where you can find kind of, where information is being put out that says, hey, these are, project convergence, and this is kind of what happened out there. So I'll share that with the team, because there's a lot of information that gets shared on those news media sources that, sometimes where you want to hear it, well, it's right there. The conversation was had. But I don't know if there's any more questions there, Sergeant Major Bloom. Hopefully that answered your question. And you're asking hard questions only because I know you're doing hard things over there.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much, Sergeant Major. And that invitation's still out there, so stop by anytime. And I know from our side of the house, we have a long ways to go, and we need to do a better job of sharing what the research and development ecosystem is doing for the Army.
Sergeant Major Bloom, let me ask you this question. How about you share it with some of us, and maybe we'll do something like this to kind of have a forum where we can talk about kind of what you got, because then it reaches much more than just Sergeant Major Nichols if you could do that.
Sure.
Not trying to put you on the spot, but I think it comes out. What do you got, Sergeant Major Timms?
So the Army Research Lab works on basic and fundamental research, which is 2035 and beyond, the science of things. Where it applies to the soldier out in the organization, they're going to be thinking about the C5 ISR, the PEOs, and the concept writers. So what we do in-house is we try to get our researchers out to the field units so they can understand the needs of the soldiers, the challenges they face, because if we can apply science and make their jobs easier, then that's ultimately where we're trying to go.
That's
so awesome. Non-COVID, we would be going out to units, but as travel starts to resume, I hope to get out to the divisional post, out to some of the signal units and brief on what ARL, what DEFCOM, and what AFC does. Over.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Sergeant Major. And like I said, that shares with the team now. So you guys all know who this guy is because, I talked to him in the past and, a great friend of mine. Sergeant Major Timms, what you got to know, we're kind of getting close to the end here.
That's correct, Sergeant Major. We got just a couple more questions and then we'll kind of close out. But
Okay.
Right now I have a question from Master Sergeant Howe. And his question is, what are your thoughts on the way ahead for signal within information dominance?
Like I said, I think that you're all over it. You're going to be in it there, Master Sergeant. I think that we have to continue to push forward. And like I said, we build the architecture. It's understanding that architecture. It's understanding that signal flow. It's understanding kind of how we support it. So within information dominance, I think that you are a critical player in it because you provide it. You provide the network. You provide the resources to shoot, communicate, and move on out. So I think that you will continue to play a huge role in it. I know that's kind of like just kind of say but that's how I see it. You will be 100% engaged. I guarantee it.
Okay, one more question for you, Sergeant Major. We have Sergeant Major Helton with his hand raised. Go ahead, Sergeant Major Helton.
Hey, good afternoon, Sergeant Major. Hey, just a real quick question. How do you see us collectively across the signal formation improving the signal core as a whole? Over.
Improving, I think that it's hard to improve what's really good already. That's how I see it, right? Like I said, we provide comms and it works 99.9% of the time. That's my take on it. Because when it doesn't work, we troubleshoot it and we fix it and we get it going, or we find the pace count, or the pace, not pace count. The primary, alternate, contingency and emergency. We do that very well. But where I think that we can improve upon is, continue to establish as we used to have the execution checklist, where I know that I had to be up on my FM channels by a particular time. I knew I had to be on the SHF by a particular time. I knew I had to have the network established by a particular time. Establishing those measures kind of allows you to kind of test yourselves. Because now when it kind of, I just remember when we used to do airborne operations, we had the old high-speed Inmarsats back then. And, within about, 15 to 20 minutes of jumping, we had an Inmarsat established. And we were already having comms. The radios were established 20, 25 minutes into it. Then we had a small dish established by about 30 minutes. And then we were able to provide these types of resources in a matter of this time. And as it was building, we were able to establish all these things. And that was the primary, the alternate, the contingency, and the emergency. Everything was put up and on. And you can't operate with just the emergency when everything else doesn't work. And that goes back to those troubleshooting things. So I think to answer your question, Sergeant Major, I think that it's, continue to do what you do, but continue to put in the flaws and in just the troubleshooting procedures so that, because it's not going to always operate the same. Request a different frequency for something, because if you operate always on the same frequency, then it's, it tends to work all the time. Again, it goes back to, if we line the dish up on the line that we spray painted on the concrete, it was always going to work until somebody moved it for us and said, we're going to aim at the other bird. And now we were troubleshooting and we didn't really know what we were doing, because all we did is we had the presets established in the other Inmarsat versus what we were doing on the other Inmarsat. So I think if it goes to my opinion would be, continue to do well at what we do and improve upon what we do well. And that goes back to, again, troubleshooting and just researching. It's also, calling a friend, because again, it's out there, who's in your network. That right now, I just introduced everybody to Sergeant Major Bloom, who's in my network. And if you don't know what he's doing, then reach out to him at ARL, because they're doing some great things. But again, hopefully that answered your question there, Sergeant Major Helton.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Major. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sergeant Major, I think this would be one of the last questions. It goes to the admin house, changing the subject, getting word. Hey, so what do you think? Do you think that we lowered the bar on giving recommendations for soldiers' achievement? Like I seen soldiers get coins and AANs for just doing their jobs. In doing so, what do we determine that what soldiers are doing outstanding better to get these types of awards? What do you think?
So my thoughts is that you're sitting in those seats, because I get to see all the evals and awards and everything else as they come about, right? So the first sergeant gets the opportunity to see those awards and everything else. I think that sometimes doing your job is not necessarily just doing your job. Sometimes it's fixing something that was broke that aligned to doing your job. I didn't get the opportunity to talk about it, but with the rat rigs, I knew that they didn't work. We knew that they didn't work, and they hadn't worked in 5 years. My sergeant got us out there. We were able to get them to work. They were able to communicate from the guys up at the Camp Liberty all the way guys down in Yongsan all the way down south. Right now, in my opinion, is that. Does that merit an award for a soldier to do his job? Well, again, it went beyond and beyond, above and beyond. It's just an example. What I would ask is, like, as a team, is that, a lot of those come about through leadership. And as the NCOs, we get the opportunity to sometimes write those awards for soldiers. And you need to recognize soldiers. You really do. A few years ago, a lot of us were deploying and going and downrange and getting awards and coming back. And, you would see the Bronze Stars get awarded. You would see, an MSM or, a DMSM. But, we've also got to make sure that maybe there's the different levels, Sergeant Major Allen. Maybe it's a coin sometimes. Maybe it's, but that's where you as the leader have to step in to have the conversation with the person's recommending it and saying, hey, I think that it would be this. Now, remember, we don't have the approval authority on any of those. All we can do is provide recommendation. Okay, so again, I think that if you see it, as a CSM, you get to see a lot of them, and maybe sometimes you just ask them the question, hey, did it go above and beyond? Is it this? To be fair, as a CSM, I get to see a lot of awards. I see a lot of retirement ones. I see a lot of retirement ones at some high level awards, and I've seen some other retirement ones that are like, why wasn't that one given this? So then it's also identifying those that probably deserve a higher level award. So it doesn't just justify just lowering an award, but it also implies that we should be looking at maybe sometimes, hey, I think the award should be recommended a little bit higher. If you need an award today, I'll give you an award. All right, so I got you squared away, Sergeant Major. No, but good question. Like I said, that's a hard one because, like I said, that's aligned to the organizations and kind of what they're looking at and what they're recommending. And across the board, it's not always going to be the same from division to corps to battalion to brigade to company to platoon. It'll change.
Oh yeah, so Ranger, I agree with all your comments. Coming up through all through the units I've gone through, it's all different. What the backstory of what's going on and just
right.
Like you, it was great. But Sergeant Major, I know we're going over a little bit, and I don't want to take too much of your time. But Sergeant Major, it was great seeing you again. From Ranger Regiment, I remember seeing you, and from across the board, the Gurners and all those guys. They're all messaging me saying, "Hey, tell them I said hello, plants and all that." So, but great opportunity, great comments. We learned a lot from you, and I know you're a storyteller and everything else, and I've always liked to hear your comments on everything you've done. So
my stories are always true, by the way. So it was, sometimes I may embellish a little bit, but it's always true.
But the floor is yours, Sergeant Major, for your closing comments.
All right. Well, like I said, I appreciate this. The opportunities, the conversation. Like I said, I had a whole bunch of stuff up there, and when as a sergeant major, I still kind of think like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Get up there, I gotta, and I think everybody does it. So I do appreciate your time and the opportunity to do this. The one thing I tie back into all this is be tied in with your leader, whomever that may be. If it's a PL, if it's a platoon sergeant, be tied into those persons and have the conversations, because even as I came on board here, I talked to Sergeant Kaiser. I'm telling him things. He knows everything about me. I know things about him. I ask him how he's doing, how the family's doing. I talk about, when he needs some time off, because there's a lot of things that happen throughout the cycle. And, you you're going to need time sometimes too. When they identify that you need some assistance, you should count on your subordinates. You should count on your team to kind of let you know that. The SMA speaks of Tim's. This is my squad often. He talks about it just about every venue he goes to. And I would reinforce that, because as I look at it, is that this is my squad. I got a pretty cool squad right now. You know, I got General Fogarty, I got Mr. Pontius, you know, I got Sergeant Kaiser. You know, in my previous job, I had some pretty high speed, you know, people along with me too, you know, and I think, you know, Sergeant Miller's on the net as well. But, you know, they were part of my squad. And as we built those things, it's the friendships. And I look at each person on here, you're part of the team too. Reach out to me if you got questions. Reach out to your leaders, and be involved with those meetings. If you go sit in the meeting, then you're going to hear it firsthand, kind of what's going on. With the question like asked about, you know, with General Fogarty, you know, he gets the opportunity to have a lot of these conversations, but he invites me into every one of those meetings. And so did General Morrison and General Crawford. I had the opportunity to sit in whatever they were talking about. So if you feel like you're being left out of that, just have the conversation. Because I tell you, a lot of times they just don't know what you're looking for. And if you can be involved with that conversation, the better you are and better prepared you are to have the conversation with the teams that are being fielded the equipment, with the teams that just don't understand the direction that we're going, and with the teams that are actually employing those systems. So again, that's what I encourage each one of you to do. And again, continue to grow your leaders, continue to challenge them and be challenged. You know, I hope to see more Ranger qualified soldiers out there in the Signal Corps. You know, Sergeant Major Lachey beats me up about that all the time. Sergeant Major Mustard tells me, and I'm just throwing out the shout outs to these guys because they want more airborne troopers. You know, if you got a soldier that wants to go be a paratrooper, reach out to Sergeant Major Mustard at 82nd G6 because he's looking for them. And, you know, he can work out a process to get a soldier into that. And then you don't have to get out of the Army to come back in the Army to be a Ranger. So outside of that, Sergeant Major, that's all I have.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for your time.
Cool.